I remember the day my father was buried like it happened just a heartbeat ago. The air was thick with the kind of August heat that makes your clothes cling to your skin, but what pressed on me most wasn't the weather. It was the weight of being unwanted in my own family. I stood a little apart from the crowd, near the row of oaks at the edge of the cemetery. Everyone else had clustered near the coffin, a neat circle of black dresses and stiff suits. My mother, Ruth, held herself like royalty, her chin high, her lips pressed together in something that looked more like satisfaction than grief. Beside her, my sister Mary leaned into her arm, whispering every so often, like the two of them were sharing secrets at a party rather than laying my father to rest. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help it. They hadn't spoken to me directly in months, not since father got sick. Even when I visited him in the hospital, Mary would hover, making sure I was never alone with him for long. And when I asked questions about his estate or his wishes, they'd brush me off. "Don't worry about things you don't understand, Esther," Mary would say with a smirk. As if I hadn't spent years at my father's side, learning every line of this land, every ledger of the family businesses. But I kept my silence, standing there while the preacher droned on. My eyes locked on the coffin. My father had been a stern man, yes, but he had been fair. He loved the land more than anything, and he often told me it would always need someone who cared about more than just the money it produced. I thought foolishly that he meant me. When the service ended, the mourners drifted back toward their cars. That was when Mother finally acknowledged me. She approached slowly, Mary still clinging to her side like a shadow. "Esther," my mother said, her voice cool, almost formal. "It would be best if you didn't come to the house today." I blinked. "The house? You mean the gathering? Everyone's going." "Yes," she said, tightening her grip on Mary's arm. "Everyone who belongs." The word sliced through me. Belongs. Mary tilted her head, watching me with that satisfied little smile. "Don't make a scene, Esther. It's Father's Day, after all." I wanted to scream, but the words froze in my throat. Instead, I nodded. "Fine." I left before they could see the tears. That night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't shake the humiliation. I replayed every moment of the funeral. The way Mother had looked at me like I was a stranger, the way Mary whispered as though guarding a prize. I knew something wasn't right. Father's estate was enormous. Land stretching over hundreds of acres, rental properties, investments. He wouldn't just leave it all in their hands. But as the days passed, I began to realize that's exactly what they intended me to believe. First came the lawyer's notice, or rather, the lack of one. Normally, after a death like Father's, beneficiaries are contacted quickly, but no letter came for me. Then I heard whispers from relatives, people who'd attended the gathering I'd been barred from. They told me Mother had spoken about continuing Father's legacy with Mary at her side. No mention of me. Not a word. I drove out to the family estate a week later, desperate for answers. The gates were closed, locked, which they had never been in my lifetime. A guard, an actual guard, stepped forward when I pulled up. "Family only," he said flatly. "I am family," I snapped. "Not according to Mrs. Whitaker." I sat there in my car stunned, while the man refused to move. Eventually, I turned around, but the fury in my chest was hotter than the summer sun beating down on the road. Something was very, very wrong. That night, I dug through the old boxes my father had given me years before. Files, ledgers, letters, scraps of a man who documented everything. And there, tucked between records of land leases and handwritten notes about soil quality, was a folder I'd never noticed before. It was labeled, in his unmistakable handwriting, "For Esther. When the time comes." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were copies of legal documents. Wills. Trusts. Deeds. My father's meticulous signature marked every page. And what I read made my blood run cold, and then hot with a fierce, wild hope. Father had prepared for this. He had known what they would try. And he had left everything in my hands. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The shock, the anger, the vindication, it all tangled together in my chest like a storm. My mother and Mary thought they'd shut me out. But they had no idea. The real battle hadn't even started. And I wasn't about to lose. I must have read those pages 100 times before the sun came up. Each word seemed to glow on the paper, as if Father had reached through time and spoken directly to me. The will wasn't just a will. It was a fortress. My father had drafted it so carefully that it almost felt like he had known what Mother and Mary would do the moment he passed. The documents outlined the estate in exact detail, every acre, every rental property, every business interest. And scattered throughout the pages were clauses I'd never seen before. Clauses that spoke about protection against undue influence, exclusion by coercion, and inheritance rights not subject to manipulation. And then, at the heart of it all, my name. Esther Whitaker, equal beneficiary and trustee of the land. Not only was I named, but I had control. Father had written that the land, the part of the estate he loved most, could not be sold or mortgaged without my signature. He had written my role in stone, carved it into the very structure of the trust. I laughed when I read it the first time, not out of humor but disbelief. My mother and Mary had gone to such lengths to shove me out, to treat me like a ghost. And yet here was proof that Father had seen me all along, that he trusted me, maybe more than he trusted them. But the laughter died quickly, because if I knew this now, so would they. And if they had hidden these documents from me, they wouldn't stop there. They'd fight me for every inch of it. By the second day, the shock wore off and strategy set in. I made copies of every page, carefully labeling and storing them in 3 separate folders. One I kept locked in my apartment. Another I gave to a close friend downtown, someone I trusted like a brother. The third, I tucked into a safe deposit box at the bank. I wasn't going to let those papers vanish. Not when they were the only thing standing between me and being erased completely. But I needed more than paper. I needed someone who knew the law, someone who could turn these clauses into armor. So I called Daniel Price. Daniel had been my father's attorney years ago, back when I was still in college. I remembered him as a sharp, unflappable man with a habit of chewing on pens until they cracked. I hadn't seen him in nearly a decade, but if anyone could tell me whether these documents meant what I thought they did, it was him. He picked up on the third ring. "Price," he said, clipped and businesslike. "Mr. Price? This is Esther. Esther Whitaker." There was a pause. Then softer, "Esther. I'm sorry about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you," I said, my throat tightening. "I need to see you. It's urgent." We met at his office the next morning. I carried the folder with me like it was dynamite. Daniel looked older, more gray at the temples, a little heavier around the middle. But his eyes were the same, sharp and watchful. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "All right. Show me." I slid the papers across his desk. He put on his glasses, leaned forward, and began to read. The minutes dragged on while he flipped through page after page, making small noises under his breath. A frown here, a raised eyebrow there. Finally, he leaned back and tapped the stack with his pen. "Well," he said, "your father was nothing if not thorough." "So it's real?" I asked. My voice cracked, and I hated the sound of my own desperation. "Oh, it's real," he said. "It's airtight. Frankly, it's one of the most comprehensive estate plans I've ever seen. He covered every loophole I'd expect your mother to try to exploit. If these documents were filed with the court, you're in an excellent position. If they were filed?" I repeated. Daniel nodded slowly. "That's the problem. I don't see any filing stamps. These are copies, which is good, but I need to confirm the originals are recorded with probate. If your mother got to the lawyer handling the estate, or somehow delayed the filings, they might be trying to establish a different version of the will." My stomach dropped. "You mean they could be pretending this doesn't exist?" He met my eyes. "Exactly. And if you hadn't found this, you'd be out in the cold, none the wiser." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The folder in front of me felt heavier than ever, like it was both my salvation and my burden. Daniel leaned forward. "Listen to me, Esther. You have a strong case, but you need to prepare for war. Your mother will not give up power easily. Neither will your sister. If they've already started consolidating the estate, they'll fight to the bitter end. A war." The word echoed in my head as I left his office. That night, lying awake in the dark, I thought about Father. about how deliberate he had always been, about the way he used to tell me, "Esther, land doesn't lie. People do, but land? Land remembers who tends it." I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about control. It was about proving that I remembered him the way he wanted to be remembered. And if it meant going to war with my own blood, so be it. The morning after meeting with Daniel, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my father's folder, like it might whisper the next move to me. Coffee had gone cold in my cup, but I didn't care. Every thought circled back to one question. What had Mother and Mary already done? Daniel was right. If the originals hadn't been filed, then my mother had leverage. And if she had leverage, she'd use it to erase me completely. The idea made my skin crawl. I couldn't sit back and wait for her to tighten the noose. I needed to see for myself what was happening at the estate. So I drove out there. The gates were still locked, and the guard was still there, sunglasses shading his eyes like he was some soldier stationed at a private fortress. He crossed his arms as I rolled down my window. "I told you before," he said, his voice flat. "Family only." I leaned out, fixing him with a stare I didn't know I had in me. "I am family. And unless you want to explain to a judge why you're obstructing a legal heir, I suggest you let me through." He shifted, uncomfortable. The bluff must have landed because he stepped back and made a call on his radio. A minute later, the gates opened slowly, creaking on their hinges. I drove through, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than I realized. The estate looked the same but different. The house, our house, loomed at the top of the hill, its white columns gleaming against the late morning sun. But there was something colder about it now, something hard. The lawn was manicured, the flowers neat, yet the place felt less alive. Like without Father, the soul had drained out of it. I parked in the circular driveway and climbed the steps, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Mary opened the door before I could knock. Well, she said, her voice dripping sugar and venom. "Look who finally found her way back." I pushed past her into the foyer, the smell of polished wood and lavender overwhelming me with memory. "Where's Mother?" I asked. "In the study," she said, closing the door. "But she's not going to be happy to see you." "I'm not here to make her happy." Mary smirked, following me down the hall. "No, I suppose you're here to make trouble. You always did like being the difficult one." I ignored her and kept walking until I reached the study. The door was cracked open, and I stepped inside. Mother sat at Father's desk, her posture perfect, her hair pinned back in a tight bun. Papers were spread across the surface. Legal papers, from the look of them. She glanced up, her expression freezing when she saw me. "Esther," she said coolly, "I thought we made it clear you weren't welcome here." "This is my home too," I shot back. "And you know it." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't rise. "That depends on the definition of home. Legally speaking, you may find you don't have the claim you think you do." I stepped closer, pulling the folder from my bag and laying it on the desk. "Funny, because I think Father would disagree." For the first time, her composure cracked. Just slightly, but I saw it, the twitch in her jaw, the flicker of recognition in her eyes. Mary gasped behind me. "Where did you get that?" "Doesn't matter," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What matters is that I have it. And it changes everything." Mother's lips pressed into a thin line. She leaned back in her chair, folding her hands neatly in her lap like a queen preparing to deliver judgment. "You've been busy," she said finally. "I learned from the best," I replied. The silence stretched, taut and heavy. Finally, Mother spoke. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Esther. That paperwork, it complicates things, yes. But do you really think you're strong enough to take on this family? To fight me?" Her voice was calm, but the threat pulsed beneath every word. I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to look away. "If that's what it takes, yes." Mary laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the air. "You? Fight us? You'll be eaten alive." I turned on her, my anger finally breaking through. "Maybe. But at least I won't sell Father's memory for a check. At least I won't pretend he didn't see me, didn't trust me. Because he did. And you can't erase that, no matter how hard you try." For a moment, the room was electric. None of us moved. Then Mother reached out, slid the folder toward her, and flipped it open with deliberate slowness. "Well," she murmured, scanning the first page. "It appears your father had more faith in you than I expected." She looked up at me, her gaze sharp as glass. "But faith won't win you this estate. You want to test yourself against me? Then by all means, let's begin." Her voice was calm, almost amused. But I saw it in her eyes, the recognition that this would not be as easy as she had hoped. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of me. She was excited. Because my mother loved a war. And now we were at the beginning of one. When I walked out of that study, my legs were trembling, but I refused to let Mary see it. She trailed behind me like a cat toying with a mouse, grinning at every step I took. "Bold move," she said. "But you don't really think this folder makes you powerful, do you?" I ignored her and kept walking toward the door. "You know what Mother does when she feels threatened, don't you?" she pressed. "She doesn't crumble. She crushes." I paused at the threshold and turned just enough to meet her eyes. "Then she'll find I don't crumble either." And with that, I walked out, the heavy door slamming shut behind me. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, even a voicemail from an attorney I didn't recognize, demanding that I present myself at a family mediation the following week. So they were moving fast. I dialed Daniel immediately, pacing my living room as I spoke. "They've already lawyered up. I think they're trying to corner me." He was quiet for a moment before answering. "Good. That means they're nervous. But, Esther, you need to understand something. Once this becomes a legal matter, it's not just about right or wrong. It's about strategy, timing, and resources. They'll use intimidation. They'll use delay tactics. They'll try to make you doubt yourself." I rubbed my temples. "I already do." "Then don't let them see it," he said firmly. "We'll prepare. You'll walk into that mediation armed with more than just copies of documents. We'll get court-certified versions, and we'll make sure the judge sees your father's intentions clearly." His confidence steadied me. But part of me still wondered, was I really strong enough for this? 2 days later, I got my answer. A letter arrived, hand-delivered by courier, with my name typed neatly on the envelope. I tore it open, expecting another legal notice. But instead, it was personal. It was from my mother. "Esther, if you continue down this path, you will regret it. You cannot possibly win against us. Save yourself the humiliation and sign away your claim. There will be compensation for you, of course, enough to live comfortably, if modestly. This is your only chance to leave with dignity. Do not mistake stubbornness for strength." Mother. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking harder with each pass. There was no warmth in her words, no motherly concern. Just ice. Just warning. I folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I lit a match and watched it burn in the sink. If that was her first shot, then I just made my answer clear. The following week, the mediation took place at a downtown office building. The conference room was sterile, polished wood table, leather chairs, a faint smell of disinfectant. My mother sat at one end, regal as ever, with Mary beside her in a navy blazer that looked 2 sizes too expensive. Across from them sat a sleek attorney I didn't recognize, his smile sharp and insincere. I took the other side of the table. Daniel sat beside me, calm and steady, his pen tapping lightly against his notepad. The mediator, a gray-haired man with glasses, opened the session with polite formality. But my mother didn't wait. "This is unnecessary," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "My daughter has been misinformed. She believes she has rights she does not, and I'd like to resolve this quickly before she embarrasses herself further." "Your daughter," Daniel said evenly, "has a legally binding trust document that gives her not only rights, but authority over substantial portions of this estate. I've reviewed the filings with the court, and they're intact. The originals exist, and they will hold up." The lawyer beside my mother shifted in his seat, but she didn't so much as blink. Instead, she tilted her head and gave me a look that made me feel 12 years old again, the look that said I was foolish, naive, out of my depth. "Esther," she said softly, almost kindly, "you don't want this fight. You've never had the stomach for conflict. Take what I've offered and walk away." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My chest tightened. Daniel touched my arm gently, steadying me. Then he leaned forward and slid a document across the table. This is a certified copy of Mr. Whitaker's will and trust, filed and stamped with the probate court. It explicitly names Esther as co-trustee and equal beneficiary. There is no ambiguity here. Your attempts to exclude her are unlawful. The mediator adjusted his glasses and looked at my mother. Do you contest this document? For the first time, a crack showed in her mask. Just a flicker, a narrowing of her eyes, a tightening of her jaw. Mary leaned in, whispering something sharp into her ear. My mother listened, then smoothed her expression and said, "We'll need time to review." "Of course you will," Daniel said smoothly. The mediator nodded and adjourned the session. As we gathered our things, Mary shot me a glare that could have cut glass. "This isn't over," she hissed. And I believed her. Because as I walked out of that room, I realized something chilling. They hadn't expected me to stand my ground. But now that I had, they'd do everything in their power to break me. And Mother? She was just getting started. After the mediation, Daniel told me to celebrate the small victory. The acknowledgement of Father's documents was no small thing. But the truth was, I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt hunted. The next few days were a blur of calls, emails, and legal jargon. Daniel sent me updates, always calm, always professional. "We're in a strong position," he repeated like a mantra. "The law is on your side." But what Daniel didn't understand, or maybe he did and just didn't say it, was that the law was only half the battle. The other half was my mother. And she wasn't bound by rules. The first sign came 2 nights later. I was walking up the stairs to my apartment when I noticed the door wasn't latched properly, just slightly ajar. I froze. I always locked it. Always. My chest went tight as I pushed it open with the edge of my hand. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed at first. But then I saw it, the folder. The one with Father's copies. I kept it locked in a drawer in my desk. The drawer was open. The folder was gone. My pulse thundered in my ears. I tore through the apartment, searching every corner, every shelf, every hiding place. Nothing. I sank onto the couch, shaking. Someone had been inside. Someone had taken it. That night, I barely slept. My thoughts kept circling back to Mary. She'd always been reckless enough to do something bold, especially if Mother told her to. But I wasn't entirely undone. I had made copies. One was still with my friend downtown. Another in the bank's deposit box. I wasn't defenseless. Still, the message was clear. They wanted me to feel exposed. Vulnerable. And it was working. The next morning, Daniel noticed it immediately. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," he said as I walked into his office. "I haven't," I muttered, sinking into the chair across from him. Then I told him about the break-in. His jaw tightened. "You should file a police report." I shook my head. "And say what? That my mother and sister might have sent someone to steal my documents? Without proof, they'll think I'm paranoid." "You're not paranoid," he said firmly. "You're targeted. Which makes this even more dangerous." I rubbed my eyes. "So what do I do?" He leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk. "We double down. Copies, backups, everything secured in ways they can't touch. And Esther," he paused, fixing me with a look. "You have to decide now if you're willing to see this through to the end. Because once we escalate, there's no going back. They won't stop. Not until they've broken you, or you've beaten them." His words sank into me like stones. No going back. I thought of my father. The way his voice used to carry across the fields when he called for me. The way he'd stand at the porch, hands on his hips, surveying the land like it was both kingdom and child. And I knew. I couldn't walk away. "Then we escalate," I said. My voice shook, but the decision was real. That evening, I drove out to the estate again. I don't even know what I was hoping to find. Maybe courage. Maybe a reminder of what I was fighting for. The gates were open this time, no guard in sight. That alone put me on edge. As I parked and stepped out, I noticed how quiet everything was. Too quiet. Then I saw Mary. She was standing on the porch, arms crossed, a smile tugging at her lips. "Took you long enough," she called. I stopped in my tracks. What are you doing out here? Waiting, she said simply. Mother wanted me to give you a message. I hesitated, every instinct telling me not to move closer. What message? She tilted her head, her smile widening. That you don't belong here. That this fight is bigger than you. And that, if you don't walk away soon, you'll regret it. Her words sent a chill through me. But what unsettled me most wasn't the threat itself. It was the way she said it, so calmly, so certain. Like she already knew how the story would end. I left without responding, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It wasn't just paper, signatures, or courtrooms. It was war in the shadows. A war my own family was willing to drag into my home, my safety, my very sanity. And in that moment, fear finally gave way to something stronger. Anger. Because if they wanted war, I was ready to give them one.